going to get started with some introductions. My name's Melissa Terrace. I'm a professor at Edinburgh College of Art. I specialise in digital cultural heritage at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm one of the co-investigators of the XR Network project. So it's my great delight to welcome you to the seminar here today in 2025. We've got two of the projects which have been funded by XR Network that are exploring interaction between data and virtual production. And first of all, we're going to hear from Bailin Deng and Salvador Alban from Cardiff University. They're going to be discussing their enhancing data compatibility, aggregation and validation in virtual production workflows project with painting practice. This is a fascinating project that tackles compatibility management challenges caused by the lack of consistent and standardized data across the virtual production pipeline. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Then we're going to hear about exploring subtitle data for interactive experiences in virtual production from Benjamin Gorman at Bournemouth University and Michael Crabb from the University of Dundee. And this project explores how virtual production can unlock new opportunities to drive viewer engagement, all through the use of subtitle data. But first of all, we're going to do a brief introduction to what XR Network is and what we do. So XR Network is a network throughout the UK, and we're funded by the EPSRC. It's a 5-year project, started in 2022, goes until 2027. And what we aim to do is we aim to provide funding and support to researchers working in virtual production technologies. We've got a huge network of partners, and we're setting the research agenda for virtual production, supporting growth and facilitating collaboration between academia and industry across the whole of the UK. The map you see there is a map of where the clusters were, which were the HRC funded clusters, and many of us from the clusters came together to fund the XR network supporting particularly virtual production. XR Network Plus is led by the University of York in collaboration with University of Edinburgh, University of Arts London, Cardiff University and Ulster University, and at the heart of it is research collaboration, co-creation and challenge-led innovation. So we're building a huge community of practice between research and industry, converging ideas, technologies, and creative practice in virtual production, hoping to deliver impact for the whole of the digital economy. What we're going to do today is a seminar showing off two of the projects that we've funded, and each set of presenters will speak for 10 minutes. This will be followed by 15 minutes of questions for both presentations, and we have some questions prepared, but please do use the boxes down at the bottom of your screen. You should be able to put in some questions as the talks go on, and we'll pick those up. And we should hopefully all be wrapped up by 3:45 or 3:50. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Bailin Deng, who's a senior lecturer in the School of Computer Science and Informatics at Cardiff University. His primary interest is 3D geometry processing and its applications, including architectural geometry. Bailin is the PI on the Enhancing Data Compatibility, Aggregation and Validation in Virtual Production Workflows project, which we'll hear about today, and co-presenting with Salvador Alban, both as well from Cardiff. Salvador is a research associate in the School of Computer Science and Informatics at Cardiff University, involved in the Enhancing Data Compatibility project. So without further ado, let me hand over to Bailin and Salvador to discuss their project. Thank you. Just stop sharing, and we should go into you. Thanks.
Thank you. So I think Salvador will be setting up the share screen right now. I just want to say hi to everyone. So my name is Bailin, and I'm the PI of this project. And today's presentation will be given by Salvador, who's the research associate working on the project. And will be in this project, we are tackling the lack of standardized approach on managing the complex data that people use in the virtual production pipeline. And Salvador will start the presentation now. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Salvador Alban. I'm joined with Bailin Deng in the call, and our team also composed of Paul Rawson, who couldn't be here. As Melissa said, our project was called Enhancing Data Compatibility, Aggregation and Validation. Just to provide a bit of background, Unreal Engine has become a key part of virtual productions. However, there's no standardized way to share this information or to export it. Just as an example, this is the Matrix City provided by Unreal. It was used to showcase the capabilities of Unreal Engine 5, its lighting, and so on. This project alone is 120 gigabytes. Obviously, not all projects are going to be like this, but we wanted to find a way to efficiently and quickly export the information from projects like these and pass them on to other people in the process. Our focus was specifically during the pre-visualization stage, otherwise known as previs. I'll briefly touch on previs in the next slide, but previs happens fairly early on in the whole process for virtual productions. And once previs is done, you need to package and send this information to other stakeholders in this production, such as the main VFX team, the editorial team, audio teams, and so on. We decided to partner with Painting Practice. They're a studio located here in Cardiff. They also have a studio in London. They're mainly a previs company, and they worked on shows on the left, for example, some of their material on His Dark Material, and on the right are previs images for the show Wednesday. But they've also worked on shows like Black Mirror and Halo. Previs mostly consists of generating concept art and also creating pre-visualization, which is a mock-up or a sort of a storyboard for certain scenes or shots, as you can see on the right. It's supposed to have very limited fidelity. That way it can be quickly rendered, but it's supposed to give the directors and people involved an idea of how the shot would look like. Our main collaboration with Painting Practice came in two parts. The first part was me helping them with their Plan V plugin development. Plan V is a suite of tools specifically for Unreal Engine 5 made by Painting Practice, which allows specifically for the users to create incremental cameras with the same standardized name. However, there were certain bugs where the naming convention would stick. Sometimes, depending on the nomenclature, null values would show up. And a lot of clients complained about the fact that if Unreal Engine ever crashed, which it tends to do, their progress wouldn't be saved and they'd have to start re-incrementing from the very beginning. So instead of having camera 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you'd expect it to go to 6 after it crashes, it'd start all the way back at 1. So I came in and helped fix these bugs and add this save state functionality. This part of the program helped me gain the knowledge of how Unreal Engine was used during and for TV and film production. And from that, we were able to focus on the main part of this project, which was Data Hub. Just as a brief reminder, our main goal was to extract information from a Unreal Engine project. And for this, we decided to develop a graphic user interface that had three main components. First was extraction, then the database, and then the classification. The extraction part was the most straightforward. We decided to extract the information into two file formats. One was a JSON file, and the JSON file consisted of the information from the level outliner. The level outliner is the assets or meshes that will be present in the background of most shots. For example, buildings, lampposts, cars, things like that. Afterwards, we decided to export additional information such as animations and level sequences using the USD file format, which stands for Unified Scene Description. USD is a file format developed by Pixar exclusively with the intent of having a unified file format between all these softwares, which is a key issue in the virtual production industry. The idea is that you can work on a USD file using Unreal and then edit some parts of the animation or assets using Maya or Blender or so on and so forth. We mainly use USD, as I mentioned earlier, to export animations. And from there, we were able to look into the spawnable assets of an animation. Spawnable assets are assets that don't exist in the level themselves. They only exist in the context of that animation. They're spawned in for that animation. The Python API didn't allow us to view much of it in detail. However, using the USD, we were able to export a lot more information from it. After all this is done, we decided to push all this information into MySQL database, which leads to our second component. We decided to use a MySQL database. That way, all the stakeholders had access to the information. They can push, pull, and even edit the information from the database. And the structure of the database consists of three main tables. The big and main table is the assets, which consists of all the assets in the level, and additionally, upon the choice of the user, certain level sequences. However, we also needed to provide additional information for the camera specifically and the level and the sequences. Hence, we create two more tables that linked to the assets table. The cameras would contain additional information such as the focal length and the aspect ratio. And the sequences table would provide information of what rather would map which assets belonged to what level sequence. This meant that whenever an artist had to know what assets to work on for his level sequence, they could look it up, the level sequence themselves, and then find what assets related to said level sequence, saving them time. Finally, came the classification component. This turned up fairly late in development, but it became a big focus for us. The classification came from an artist in painting practice mentioning that they'd like to be able to look up on the database assets by their class or by their classification. They mentioned, for example, being able to look up all the vehicles, all the architecture, all the characters, props, and so on. For this to work without what we designed, it would rely a lot on the organization and pre-intended classifications from the studio themselves. And as mentioned earlier, some of these projects can be massive, 120 gigabytes worth. So it's not practical to expect them to go one by one and classify these objects. Instead, we leveraged an AI model called Clip, which is developed by OpenAI. OpenAI is your typical image classification model. And the way we tackled this was by taking the assets and taking rotating pictures of them, both in the Y and X axes, to have a better view of the entire object. And then something Clip does exclusively is it allows the user to upload their own classifications. So it allows them to, instead of just telling you what the object is by viewing it, you can ask it to try to fit it into these categories. Here's an example of how it would work. Underneath each of the videos of the rotating images, you can see the classifications for all of them and the percentage of how many times they came up per object. The correct category is always the most frequent out of all of these. However, as you can see, it's only 48% confident it's a human. I think this was mainly due to how some of the pictures were taken, but we also allow for the user to edit these classifications, specifically the first one, and only the number one category will be pushed onto the database. One of our end goals was to publish all of this as open source code, and we managed to do that in a GitHub. There's a QR code in the corner for you to access this repository. Thank you so much for your time.
That was brilliant. Thanks so much. I'm going to hold off asking questions. I want to ask you so much. I have a background in library science and information, and as I spent 15 years in a library school, so I'm really interested to come back to chat about that, about how this fits into looking after our digital assets. And there's a huge aspect of digital preservation, but we'll get into that. We'll do questions afterwards. So I'm going to pass over now to the next two presenters, and their topic is exploring subtitle data for interactive experiences in virtual production. We have Benjamin Gorman from Bournemouth University. Benjamin is Deputy Head of the Department of Computing and Informatics at Bournemouth. His research specialises in human-computer interaction and accessibility. and Dr. Michael Crabb from the University of Dundee, who is Head of Computing with the School of Science and Engineering at the University of Dundee, and his research interests fall into three main areas: immersive technology design, accessibility of digital media artifacts, and games accessibility and testing. So over to you, Benjamin.
Thanks. Let me just share my screen. Sorry, can't get my thing. There we go. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. Yes, so my name is Ben and I'm from Bournemouth University, and this project was completed with my co-investigator, Mike Crabb from the University of Dundee, and we collaborated with ITV's accessibility team as well to do this project. So today I want to share with you how we've explored the creative potential hidden inside a very everyday piece of media production, the subtitle file. But really, what are subtitles? So subtitles are time-stamped transcripts of media, and they're sitting behind almost every broadcast and video library out there. So on the right-hand side of this slide here, I have an example of a subtitle file. This is a VTT subtitle file, which is used on web-based players. And you can see this one's got some what are called Q tags, and that gives the video player color. So this is a more heavily marked up subtitle file, but you can see the time code and where the text lies, and that's what gets told to the video player when the subtitle file exists. But what if subtitles were used for more than just accessibility? Okay, that's what we ask in this work. Subtitles structure who speaks, when they speak, and what is actually said. And it's a free-ish production scale data source, as in it's already there. We already have to have it for accessibility. So we might as well use this invisible layer. We might as well unlock its potential. And what is that potential? Well, we think that subtitles could be used as what we call a creative bridge back to storytelling and the production. But you might be asking, especially after Salvador's talk, why not use AI, right? Why should we not pump AI into videos and analyze them? So AI-driven scene and audio analysis sounds exciting. It sounds really great, but it's computationally expensive at scale, right? And you imagine putting everyone's video library, so ITV's video library, into AI to analyze. It's just not going to work, right? Whereas the subtitles are already time-aligned to the video. They're already required for accessibility, which means they're already high quality. They're already human edited. And really, they're sitting there unused in media archives, right? So we wanted to get some real data and see what the real potential was. So we partnered with ITV, and they provided us with post-production materials. So we got some videos, some subtitles, some scripts, so some post-production scripts, and some audio description files as well. So we wanted to work with this messy real-world broadcast content. In our previous prototypes, before this funded project, we were working with our own marked up subtitle files, but we wanted to see what could we do with actual production-ready stuff. So ITV gave us access to full TV episodes. So we got Vera, The Chase, Joanna Lumley, and of course, because it's ITV, we got Coronation Street, right? So we got 4 subtitle files. They do use the European Broadcast Union's TTML format, which isn't used on web-based players. So we wanted to convert them first to VTT. And we got some audio description files and then some kind of messy Word doc files, which are used for the scripts. So after looking at that data, we thought, well, what is the real issue here? And actually, when we were chatting to ITV, they told us that they actually start with the scripts for Coronation Street. And because they move quite fast in production, they actually use them to make the subtitles. But actually, there's so much heavy information lost. They take out, for instance, the speaker identity, the scene context, the emotional context, the chapters between the different scenes. And all that gets lost when it moves into subtitles. You can put them into subtitle files, but it gets lost in the current process. And we wanted to see, well, what can we do to kind of rebuild that creative pipeline, put that data back into where it was? So in our previous work, we've kind of played around with many different ideas for what we think subtitles can do to do weird stuff with media experiences, realistically. And consistently, we've returned to these 3 direct opportunities, which we kind of block into adapt, segment, and enhance. So we think subtitles can do these 3 different things to media files. So we wanted to develop a modular toolkit based on this work, and we call it the XR Subtitle Suite. And inside this is a set of tools that we can use to reveal how subtitles, existing subtitles, and metadata can drive new media experiences. So I'm going to talk you through these 3 different systems we've built, give you a little demo. And the idea is to show you a flavor of what's possible now, right? So the first thing we've got is that we can turn videos into printable stylized layouts using just the subtitle files to drive that experience. Okay, so we're talking about storyboards, comic strips, visual timelines. So we could take that Joanna Lumley episode and do something like this, right? Again, no AI, no pre-processing, just using the subtitle file and the video file, right? So I'm going to show you how it works in a short demo. So in this demo here, this is the kind of setup screen for choosing the different options. Now, at the moment, there's too many options for an actual user, but that's kind of the idea, right? We want to give this to a user and say, what did you enjoy playing with, right? So you can choose how the frames are pulled out with the video file. So you can do it by subtitles. You can do it by, time-based condensing, which means you put as many subtitles onto one frame. We can do it by scene. We can do it by narrative. So we can actually say we just want to see one character on that printed layout, right? And then we do our options, we hit go, and then a minute or so later, we get something that looks like this. So we get an HTML version and a PDF. But this one I'm showing you here is what we call our interactive mode. So you can like stylize live and change what it looks like. So if I play through it now, you can see we've got the frames and the subtitles, and then we can actually go into a particular frame at that particular point. So then we can also restyle it. So we can put it into a storyboard format. We can put it into a timeline format, right? We could say, actually, we want to change how the subtitle in our comic book looks. We want to change them to captions. We might want to, make them inline, but maybe we want to change how it looks to match the tone of that show. So there's a lot of pink in the show because we're in Paris, right? So what if we have that kind of rich Parisian feel, right? So that's printed media, right? That's just one of our tools. So just done by subtitles. But something else we can use the subtitles for is what I said, segmenting. So this is subtitle-driven video segmentation in what we call Segment Explorer. So viewers can slice and restitch video by speakers, dialogue lines, audio description moments, script moments, and chapters, which are probably pulled from the scripts, right? So again, I'm going to show you a short video of how this works. So we're going to use the same video file. And in this interface, all of the moments for different categories are shown on a timeline. So we've got segment by speaker, segment by chapter, subtitle, audio description, and script. Now for this one, there's no characters in the subtitle file. We've kind of guessed, pulled some of them out, right? We could actually see all the dialogue lines here by moment, by the audio description moments as well, which are slightly different to what's in the subtitle file. We could do it by scripts. So again, we've just done a very dirty version of this, gone through the script file, pulled all the time codes out. You can flick through the script as well. But what Segment Explorer allows you to do is if we go back into the subtitle mode, we can select particular subtitle lines, and then it can build as a cut just of what was said at those particular moments, right? And if we hit process cut, this is live, by the way, this is not sped up, right? This is how fast this system is. And we've got our moment, right? And in that moment, you can see actually there's lots of pauses between those lines. And currently, Segment Explorer just smooshes them together. So it means you can take like a 45-minute show and just cut it down purely by cutting out the gaps in the dialogue. Or you could restitch them so you could have subtitles from different points in the video, and it can give you a particular cut of video. So that's slicing video. And the last thing we wanted to do was actually play around with pulling out emotions and context from the scripts and the audio description files and putting them back into the subtitles. So many audiences now watch with subtitles primarily, but subtitles still look the same, right? We can change the fonts, we can change the styling, some of that we can change, but what if subtitles kind of felt the story and not just told it? So in this demo, what we've got is we can actually look through the subtitle file and add in some emotional context, then make that emotional context prevalent in the way we display the subtitles. So we can see we've got just different emotions here. We could do more with this. This is more like the most experimental of the three tools. And then if we play this short clip, it's going to have a angry and a happy emotion in there. And we can say that, show that plays in the moment as the video.
Of a
So you can kind of get an idea about how that works, right? So what is next? So we've got these two tools. We've got our real data. Well, now it's time for real users, right? We want to have users actually play around with the tools and see how they respond to them and what experiences they actually want. It's because we probably want to limit some of the stuff we're currently doing. So the main takeaways from what we did in this project. The one is that subtitles are underused creative assets. They hold the bones of entire media experiences, such as character, structure, timelines. We demonstrated that even those messy files, those unfinished files, have huge creative potential. The second takeaway is the richer the subtitles are, so we've made some richer subtitles, the brighter the VP features, the more you can do, right? So they could power discovery, navigation, automation. So if we capture all that metadata early and put it into the files in production, massive potential later on. So the big takeaway is that subtitles are structured story data, but we currently don't use it for that. And richer production metadata offers richer VP opportunities, and small changes down in production could present massive opportunities downstream for VP. So thank you very much. We're looking for collaborations, and if you're interested in doing more with subtitles, give us a shout. Thank you very much.
That was brilliant. Thank you. We've got a time now. We've got about 20 minutes or so to have a chat. If you do have questions, do drop them in the Q&A underneath. It strikes me that both of these projects, very, very different projects, but you're both talking about the kind of hidden data which accrues when we're doing any of these production pipelines, whether it's making the videos or whether it's thinking about what we do with the content and making it available in other formats. It interests me at what point you've decided to work on that. And do we think overall, it's a leading question, that the sector, the creation sector, doesn't really know about all the data that it has or that it could have to help it do reuse? Is that a fair thing for me to say, do you think?
I mean, I would say so, yeah. And we've chatted to ITV and BBC in the past as well, and they kind of know this, but we've chosen to start at the end to say, here's what you could do. Imagine what you could do. And I think that's an easier way to motivate people doing extra work at the earlier stage, right? And sometimes it's actually quite a complex process that unstrips that information. Like it is there. And then just through all the conversions, it kind of gets lost. So it's more about, can we preserve that? And it seems that ITV actually does preserve it in some different ways. And it's just what they actually present to the outward facing world doesn't have that data available from what we saw, at least.
And both of you have either thought about using AI or are using AI, and the wealth of information that there is there that could be used to train other things, or not necessarily just for generative AI, but also to help people discover this. I'm immediately thinking about the subtitle stuff. I'm immediately thinking about a project at the University of Edinburgh on Gaelic subtitles, which is using speech to text they made the first model for Gaelic. There wasn't a model for Gaelic. So speech to text on all the Scottish television programs in Gaelic. So they could subtitle them, and then we could use AI to help develop products. So I must put you in touch with them, actually, because that's the kind of thing, the National Library of Scotland and the Screen Archive and their Scottish television Gaelic programming, and what do you do about subtitling? So I can see how that aligns. But you're, Bailin in Salvador, you're making new data from the creation process for, I presume, reuse, so people don't have to make things again. They can integrate things in different productions, they can speed things up, they can find the resources. How well do you think that the production sector does in looking after its own assets?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think the project actually started when one of our collaborators connected us with painting practice, and so one of the director in the technical part basically explained to us what the problem they were facing at the moment. So at the time, they always need to sort of manually set up the structure of the data they were using, and that has caused a lot of issue for them, especially when they need to exchange the data between different teams. So they were hoping to see whether there's any automated way to help them to manage the data better. And I think that's that's why we came in and try to use our expertise in programming to try to come up with a solution that try to automate the process. And also, you mentioned about the use of AI. I think a big promise of AI is really in the automation of repetitive work. So, for example, when Salvador explained just now that theoretically speaking, you could input the classification of all the access you have, but that's basically impractical because there are so many of them. So if we can use AI to speed up that process, even if AI is not always giving you 100% correct results, but we still have a fallback solution to help you to sort of correct that minority where AI is getting it wrong. So in this way, you get a speed up of quite a significant speed up in the process of tagging all the access you have for their classification. And I think that's one promising direction of how we could use AI to make the process more efficient and more manageable.
It's really interesting for me. I spent 15 years in a library school teaching them about advanced digitization. And so in the kind of library and archive world, there's these frameworks for digital preservation, frameworks for classification, and you're coming at it from a slightly different angle, which is fine. But I'm kind of, my head's going, what, Dublin Core and the kind of things that I know about library systems, going like, where are these classification things? And I do wonder about a dialogue between some of the digital preservation community into what they standardly do, and there's probably room for a dialogue there to learn from each other. There's been a real I think the library sector, that the kind of using computers to classify stuff is still seen as really problematic. But what you're showing is that it can speed up things, and as long as you still have the human in the loop, you could repurpose a lot of digital assets which you just wouldn't have the time to deal with, right? And it's about getting that ethical use of AI in the right place. I wonder for both of your projects if you've done any thinking about data ethics and these kind of questions about human labor and where efficiencies are entered into the process, and making sure that you're on the good side of all that rather than the problematic side of Gen AI. Have you got any thoughts about the ethics of any of this?
I mean, we've talked about, even with actually BBC and both ITV, is actually what is the ethics in terms of virtual production of. So both of our systems can basically slice video into particular moments and kind of cut out people, right? Now, you don't need to use it for that. You can actually make it so you can have, I don't know, an episode of Coronation Street just with one family in it, right? And then you might want to watch them separately. But essentially, you could just say, I really don't like that actor. I really don't want that person in the show. And what does that mean for that person's work, right? Do they still get paid if you're watching it? I don't know, right? And they don't seem to know either. So I think that aspect is a little bit unclear. And in terms of the ethics of it, yeah, we weren't allowed in terms of our contract with ITV to actually put any of their data into AI. So we didn't play around with that. I think we do have lots of ideas around ways you could use AI to further do some of the stuff that we're doing and expand on it. So if you can slice out particular segments from an episode, can you then ask an agentic AI when you're watching an episode about what's happened maybe in the previous episodes, but you might not want to Google that because you don't want to get the spoilers for the episode that's coming up, right? So I think actually feeding what you're currently watching or what you have been watching based on the subtitles would be really fun to play around with and ask those specific questions. But again, there's a lot of issues around what happens then with those data going into AI systems and stuff. And I think that's tricky in terms of paying the rights holders. I think that's more where the issues would lie, I think.
And a lot of the stuff that we've found as well is as soon as you start to look at advertising rights, that's where things get incredibly more challenging. So if you think about this in terms of sports broadcasts, so take F1, for example, the cars are covered in advertisements, and that's the specific things that the teams are being paid to show on screen. Whereas if you say, like Ben said, you're not interested in a specific team or a specific driver, and that was to come out, all of a sudden that becomes a complete minefield in order to look at. So yeah, I think that the more that we play around with the creative process, the more that we need to be aware that the creative process is there for a reason. And it's trying to figure out all of the bits of the puzzle. Like you only ever see 3 sides of a dice at once. So what happens on those other 3? And how do we make sure that we're paying attention to everything?
I like that. I'm going to steal that. The dice comment. Yeah, sure.
No, I was just saying I was going to steal the analogy as well. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's Salvador and Bailin. Did you want to come in on any of the ethical or labor aspects of your project?
Yeah, I think being well with a previous company, I think that one of the good things is that because if they use Unreal Engine, most of the asset within the system is sort of virtual. So it helps to alleviate with the issue of using data that could have privacy implications, because you basically create all those things, virtual objects or virtual human beings by yourself. Another thing we did put consideration on is, well, at the moment, we are using these pre-trained models to help us with the classification, which means that these were trained using potentially public data set where there could be some ethical issues if you look at what data they have been used for the training. But the way we approach the problem is that actually you can choose not to use that model at all. You can basically use whatever data you have within your studio to train the model. So our approach actually allows
Oh, Berlin's
some
frozen. Yeah, you frozen a little bit there. Repeat the last
Okay.
sentence that you said.
Yeah. Am I okay now?
Yeah, you're back.
So I was saying we actually allow the possibility for the studio to train the model using their data by themselves, because if you think about how different studios could classify data in their different ways, then it might be a good idea for each studio to have their own model rather than using a sort of a unified model for every studio. So theoretically speaking, they could start by training the models using their own data and using their own labels, which tells us what classification there is for each object. So in that way, you basically separate out all the potentially problematic data that has been used for training those pre-trained models, and you know where the data comes from. You train the model by yourself, so that helps to alleviate some of the ethical concerns as well. But still, we haven't touched on the explainable AI aspect. So right now, what this model does is basically a black box. So I think that's something that can potentially be explored in the future if we want to sort of dig deep into the ethical aspect of AI and make them more explainable.
Yeah, I think that's one of the huge issues for it used in the kind of library and archive sector for classification is the black box aspect. And of course, we don't have to use OpenAI. We can build our own, but then we're looking at the kind of infrastructures. And I'm thinking about the infrastructures that we need to store both of the types of data that you're dealing with, and especially if you want to share that. Now, this data is commercially viable in both projects, so it's not like it's going to be open access or openly published in any ways. But what are your feelings about that and moving towards making this kind of data more accessible so other people can like be working in this space? I don't know enough about the areas that you're working in as to the tensions there, but is this, can researchers get access to this to kind of build tools to help, or is it very dependent on that relationship with these commercial providers?
And in our case, you can go and find a YouTube video downloader, right? You can pop in the YouTube link and you can download an SRT file, right? And you can play around with subtitle files, right? There's a variety of different ways to get subtitle files out of different players, you know. I think it's definitely easier to have access to them. But again, we're not doing anything different. We're just using the raw files, right? So we've not added anything into the subtitle files at all. So there is no extra data in there. We're making judgments based on that data, right? And we could do a lot more. So we could, for instance, use our scripts and audio description and add them, say, well, currently a lot of our subtitle files are missing the speaker tags, for instance, but they're in the script files at the same time points. And they say somewhat the same thing. So we could say, oh, well, if it's missing, we'll just add them back in, right? So it's more about enhancing the data. But again, you don't even need to share that as a data set. You can just do that on the fly as you're playing the subtitle file. So we're actually almost making up the data as we go along, like in this live loop. And the idea is, yeah, the companies who are using these themselves would actually just have a richer data set, and they don't need to necessarily share them with anybody else. And I think when we initially did a very similar project to this as part of iCure, which is kind of a funded Innovate UK aspect, our kind of angle was streaming companies are all fighting for survival, right? If they had better data sets, like their subtitle files, and they could do more stuff with them and offer those features, then well, why not do it, right? Because again, it's almost, they've got the data sitting there doing nothing. They're already storing it, like you said about storing it. They're already storing these subtitle files somewhere. They're already paying companies to go through and subtitle them. Why not just tell them, hey, when you subtitle them, just make sure the characters are in there and we can do some fun stuff, right? That's our angle.
I like it. I'm on your side. And what about this question about data storage and infrastructures needed for all of this? Have you thought about that at all, Salvador and Bailin?
I think one of the earliest, one of the key steps we need to take, at least when it comes to TV and film productions, is the amount of file formats there are when it comes to different softwares. And I think that the first step is, it's slowly coming to this point, but it's the adoption of USD. It might be the first case, or it might not be the best solution, but I believe that USD allows for ease of access between all the softwares, just one file format, which can do so much. And I think this allows for better just storage and better compatibility all around.
Yeah, as someone who is a chartered librarian at some point during my career, I wholeheartedly sign up to that too. So thank you. It's been interesting comparing your two very different projects and thinking about the kind of areas which come across. Final question to you both before I do some wrapping up. So XR Networks obviously is supporting virtual production and all kinds of research in virtual production, but what are the areas of virtual production that you would most like to see improvement on over the next 5 years? What are the areas that you think, whether related to your research or thinking about other research, what are areas that people should be watching for or thinking about?
It's a good question. I mean, I would say that it's still not really clear what audiences actually necessarily want. And that might not be because they don't want these extra things, but you know, it's definitely there for producing stuff, and we can produce stuff faster and in better ways and all that kind of stuff. But I think we could do more. I think we can make experiences more immersive and more interactive. And I would like to see that side of it explored a bit more. And sometimes that is with the sharing of data sets, right? If big media companies offered not all of their data, just some of their example data, say, hey, this is kind of what we work with. Because actually we've never really got access to the full data set that ITV gave us before. And we were like, oh, actually, and we had to play around with some weird stuff, right? So they all started like the 10-minute off, the 10-hour onset. So I had to like undo by 10 hours because they're production timestamps. So all of that was fun to play with as well.
And I guess that the other thing as well is that, so the aim of every media company is basically to keep a customer on their platform for as long as possible. And it's very easy to make products and services that will do that. We've all been down the YouTube rabbit hole. But what's not easy is finding a way that does that for good. So finding a way that will keep people entertained, but also let them learn something new at the same time. So yes, you're going to be engaged with a show, but is this a show that will teach you to cook a new dish, that will give you new skills? So trying to think beyond the, let's just keep you engaged in a platform, but how can we keep you engaged in this and also help you to expand what you can do with your life as well? And I think that's one of the big things, is trying to figure that side of things out.
Cool. Bailin, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting thing would be how the current virtual production pipeline could be more accessible to the public in the future. So we think about the TikTok, for example. So in the past, it's not so easy for people to make videos to sort of upload them to a platform. I mean, you have YouTube, but it wasn't as easy as when you use TikTok. So are we going to see a virtual production pipeline or software that helps people to use this new technology to come up with better quality videos and use them on their platform? And that would be one interesting direction to look at. And also, I think with the very fast movement of AI, whether generative AI or other types of AI could help to improve the efficiency or quality of virtual production results, I think that would be one interesting aspect as well. So if, for example, we have seen video generation models that are getting more and more realistic. So would that be a possibility of integrating that into virtual production, and would be one interesting problem to look at.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And Salvador, have you got any thoughts on that you want to come in with?
I completely agree with Bailin. I feel like with the amount of growing technologies, I feel like we need to either evaluate the ethics behind generative AI and whether or not if it's of any value, or like what are we losing from it being so quickly accessible and easy to generate.
Yeah, there's a really interesting article I was just reading over lunch about what we as humans are losing when we concentrate too much on generative AI as well, and even understanding how we can quantify that as for researchers to understand how it's changing us, never mind changing the workplace, never mind changing, society, never mind changing business. And I think there's a real reckoning there. So thank you. I did say it was the last question, but we have got a question from the audience. Woohoo. So someone has asked, an anonymous attendee, thank you, has asked about the creative process and humans, and said, do you have any further insights on working with industry partners on these projects? Is the value for industry clear at this stage? So has anyone got any comments on how to build good relationships with industry while you're doing these types of projects?
Tricky. I mean, it depends in what way. I think these projects were quite short, and the delays that we had getting our contract signed kind of meant we actually had limited time to work with them. It's definitely spurred on that relationship, and I think we've managed to show a lot of potential to them. So it allowed them to explore some ideas and things they were looking to say, oh yeah, we know we can have this data. What can you kind of do with it, rather than them having to spend a lot of time doing it. So yeah, hopefully that relationship has been started and it's going to continue. That's the idea. So it's allowed us an easy kind of way into making that happen. So that's what we've been feeling, I think.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yes, I think for us, one of the experience we have that we think we did right was to listen to the industry to see what exactly is their requirements. Because so we know there is a problem there, but when we initially contacted our industry partner and tried to listen to them to see what exactly was the problem, I think initially it wasn't super clear, but we did spend quite a few weeks, or basically a month at the beginning, to basically work with them. So Salvador was working with them to basically understand the pipeline and understand what exactly is the issue they were trying to resolve. So that helps a lot in getting a clear direction of what exactly we need to approach. So maybe Salvador can comment on that as well.
Yeah, one of the key parts of this collaboration was the open communication. It was constant. We were constantly bouncing ideas off of each other. It felt like just as they were creative in their work, this itself project was creative between the two of us. My voice was heard, their voice was heard. And I think something that really spiked my interest was one of the artists I was talking to at the time in painting practice mentioned that there is a space for a computer scientist or a software engineer to fit into a studio like this. There's a gap of knowledge that artists aren't required or expected to know that software engineers and computer scientists can fill. So I feel like that was an interesting part of this whole collaboration.
That's a really interesting point, and I think that actually we could probably do some work across the projects that we funded to do some more kind of feedback on some of the good things, but also the pain points about industry collaboration to give advice to others, because it's always seems much simpler on paper, doesn't it? These projects, rather than actual the kind of real world roadblocks as you go in. So thanks for that. It's really really interesting. I'm going to try and share my screen again. Is that happening? Share. Then you no, you're going to see, oh, I'm going to do that and then you'll see my slides. Is that good? Can you see my slides? Okay, so I'm going to wrap up now. So thanks so much for both of the pairs of presenters for coming today, and thank you, the audience, as well for joining us. Before we go, there's a quick look at what's coming up at XR Network Plus Towers. Our next seminar will be happening on Thursday the 12th of June, and we're going to be looking at live performance in XR. We'll be looking at 2 more projects that have been funded by XR Network Plus, one from Abertay University and one from Goldsmiths University of London. And if you sign up to our newsletter and if you follow us on social media, we'll be sharing more about that event shortly, and you'll also hear about other things which are happening in XR Network Plus. We're going to South by Southwest London a week earlier from that. We're going to be talking about the project that we've done with the Royal Shakespeare Company, looking at, again, live performance in XR, and we're going to discuss how to preserve the magic of theatre while continuing to innovate with new technologies. Then in June, later on in June, we are part of Immersive Artists The Big Thing, which will be taking place in venues across Bradford. So Big Thing's bringing together all the immersive art community with a whole few days worth of very exciting keynotes, workshops, panel discussions, show and tells, and XR Network Plus will be hosting 2 events on Wednesday the 11th of June, and the programme for the whole festival has just been launched, so do have a look at that and what is to offer. Our next roadshow will be taking place at the University of Bath on the 16th of July. Again, watch out in the socials for how to sign up to that. We'll be sharing more about that event in coming weeks. So do join our social media channels and we can hear the latest updates and everything that we're doing. The workshops and the roadshows are a really good place to meet a whole bunch of people between academia and industry as well. So they're always a great amount of fun. And that's it for me today. So thank you once again for joining us today. And a big thanks to everyone who has presented, to Bailin, Salvador, Benjamin and Michael. And we hope to see you again at some other XR Network Plus event. And thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.